Dr. Evil, while you were frozen, we began a program to clone you.
Cool.
He is exactly like you in every way. Except 1/8 your size.
Breathtaking. I shall call him Mini-Me.
Oh yes, I've been wanting to supermoto one of these minis for quite a while, and now that we have the 60 volt, we're finally gonna go about doing it. So let's talk about turning this Mototech into a supermoto, and there are quite a few ways that you can go about doing that depending on how much money you wanna spend. Why don't we go over these in levels of cheapness? Level 1 would be pretty simple and just replace the tires, take off the knobbies and put on something a little more street oriented. This option would just be the cost of the tires, which probably would be give or take 50 bucks depending on where you find them. Actually, the first level, which I guess we'll call level 0, would be the free option and just burn out these tires completely to the point where there are no longer knobbies and it's just smooth, although I don't recommend you do that. The step up from that, level 2, would actually be addressing the diameters of these two wheels. They're actually different. The front is a 14 and the rear is a 12. So what a lot of people will do is actually buy the front of a 36 volt bike because the front is a 12-inch. That way you have 12s on both the front and the rear, and then you would just add tires on top of that. So cost-wise for level 2, you're just adding a new front rim, which is about 40 bucks on Mototech's website. Then the step up from that, level 3, would be the simplest but most expensive, and that's just buying a full supermoto setup for these bikes from Electro & Co. The Electro & Co kit is fully assembled and ready to bolt on, and it's actually a smaller diameter. It's 10 inches front and rear rather than 12 and 14, so it's more proportional to something like a full-size bike when it goes down to a 17-inch diameter. Now normally when I come up with these things and I want to do them myself, I go as cheap as possible, although I'm not going to be burning out the knobbies just so this looks like it's a street tire. I actually want to do this somewhat legitimately in that I want this to look like a proper shrunken down supermoto. So I want the rims to match diameter-wise front and rear. Now normally that would be going with the level 2 that I mentioned earlier and buying a 36 volt front rim. But I want to be as close to the Electro & Co kit as I can, which is exactly what I have. This is my cheap Electro & Co rip-off kit, and it's kind of in line with getting rims from the 36 volt, but just taking it a step further. Rather than getting one 12-inch front, I actually bought two 10-inch rears. In addition to the two rims, of course, we got to get tubes, so I have two 10-inch tubes. Then I found two 10-inch tires from IRC. Now they're a little bit lesser known, but they are legitimate because IRCs come stock on some of the major Honda bikes. They're no Kendas, but they'll do. So now let's talk cost for all of this for the Electro & Co rip-off set. The two rims from Mototech were $40 each, another 10 for the tubes, and then I found these on eBay for a really good deal, about 25 bucks each. So that means with all these components, this cost me about 140 bucks, which is a lot less than Electro & Co.'s 250. So let's go about putting it together. Oh my God, look at how cute that is. It's so tiny. But before we even go installing, the first thing about the rims that I've noticed is that this has no protection whatsoever for the spokes. So normally on any kind of dirt bike rim or something, you'd see a piece of rubber that goes over this. So basically that the rough parts of these little bolts and stuff won't puncture the tube that's going to go inside of here. So I'm just going to make one here out of electrical tape. Now the real struggle can begin. Got some soapy water here and going to apply this very liberally, absolutely everywhere.
Here we go again. Looks like it's time for a video montage. Because who's got the time?
Oh yes.
As we work in the garage. Time to move this along, so we'll pace it with the song. Retention is key, and I want the algorithm to like me. Yes, it's a montage song made with AI, because I'm not creative, but at least it's over.
Oh. That was anticlimactic, but good Lord, that took forever. Rest in peace, rim. I'm covered in paint chips. All right, let's get some air in it. Cool, so we'll let that sit with the high PSI just to make sure that everything is fully seated, and then we'll air it down to the correct PSI, but that's one down. And with that, we have the second one done as well. Even though the second one was a little bit easier than the first, still with those 10-inch rims, they're so small, and peeling that rubber up and over, it is a fight, I'll tell you that. But now it's ready to go in, and we're gonna start with the rear. So we're gonna start with the rear here because with extensive measurements and things on this as well as my 48 volts, I'm pretty sure that the hub that they use for the rear, regardless whether it's the 36, 48, or the 60 volt, are all the exact same. So this one is going to bolt right up. And that's even taking into account that the 60 volt actually has the chain on the left side here, as opposed to the 48 volt, which has it on the right. And there goes everything. Also, when it comes to the rear and the front, the brake discs and the sprocket for the rear did not come with the rims, so we need to transfer these over. But again, I think they use the exact same hubs, so they should line right up. All right, moment of truth. I'm just gonna put the stock spacers that just came with the rear and just see if that lines up nicely. I'm hoping that it will. Well, right off the bat, the brake lines up pretty nice. Oh, it works. Well, it wouldn't be a Supermoto bike without some trimming involved. As you spin it, you can hear that it's scraping. So the 60 volt actually has a dedicated chain guide, something like you would see on a full-size bike that you don't see on the 48 volts, which is interesting. 2 of these 4 bolts here are long enough that actually goes all the way through, and it's the end of this bolt that is scraping on the rim. Well, it looks like I might not have to do any kind of trimming at all. So the silver one there is what I pulled out, and I looked at my parts bin just to see what kind of bolts I had laying around, and I have 2 that are perfect. I think the size is going to be just right. It's going to be flush, and it's not going to stick out and scrape the rim. That's more like it. Now comes the front, and with this one, it's not going to be as easy as it was in the rear because I think we might actually need more parts.
All right, today's objective is to get the last piece of the puzzle. Because I'm putting such different sized rims, particularly on the front, I'm gonna need different spacers. And I probably could get away with shaving off these stock spacers, but I wanna keep it as swappable as possible. I always like to try to preserve the stock components as much as I can in case I ever wanna go back. And that way I have a street setup and I have a dirt setup. So the objective today is to get up to Marshall's Hardware within the hour because they close at noon. They should definitely have something, some kind of tube that's gonna be the exact same inner diameter and hopefully outer diameter that I'm looking for.
So as you just saw the other day, I picked up these, which are axle spacers for a trailer. Now these ones are not exactly what I need. This is a 1/2 inch inner diameter, which is almost perfect. It's just a hair over, and I'd rather be over than under, of course, than the Mototec's 12.5 millimeter, which is a really weird size. And in retrospect, had I known this when I ordered the rims, I just would have picked up some extra spacers, whatever their longest ones were from Mototech. I think they're like $3. But we have the front here without any spacers, so that way we can kind of see where things line up and so I can take some measurements. So as I expected, with this being a rear hub, this is a lot wider than the front hub is, as you can see here. So this spacer is a little too long now, so we need something shorter. Same for this side. We're gonna take a measurement here as well so we can trim that side. And I think some more trimming needs to be done to the actual hub here. You can see it's really close and basically touching. I mean, once we torque this thing down, it's probably gonna be touching the fork here. So I think this lip needs to be shaved down, as well as maybe even the bolt holes right here. So when we make the cuts to the spacers, I'm also gonna be making cuts to this. All right, you join me a lot later than I left you last, but I think I got everything set up. Let me show you. Got those spacers in there after I put everything in and measured it. So for reference, if you're gonna be doing this, on this side it was 13.5 millimeters long, and on this side it was 18 millimeters long. And you can see even further the trimming that I had to do here. So as you saw previously, there was this lip that held on the sprocket, so I shaved that flush, and then I shaved off the bolt section, as you can see here, but just shaved it down and then tapered it over just a little bit. I could have cut these things flush, but I figured this is good enough. And I even took off this plastic trim and shaved that as well. So this actually wraps around on the inside a little bit right here. So at the very bottom to about here down, I cut this little square off of it. I didn't really have to trim this. It was pretty flush to it, but this makes it a lot better. And that is really good clearance, especially considering all the other Supermotos that I've done in the past. This is really good.
We've got to try this thing out. Oh, it feels so good right off the bat. Oh, it handles so nice. Never realize how smooth it is until you take the dirt tires off and you're not dealing with knobbies. The constant contact patch of a street tire is just unbeatable on the asphalt. Even just little corners like this, Little circles. Oh, I'm gonna have so much fun with this thing.
Well, I think it's safe to say that the Supermoto wheel set ripoff was a complete success. I'm really happy that Mototech's electric lineup is so compatible between all of its models, and this will 100% work on the 48 volt too. Now, I've only just ridden this for a short burst, just for a quick shakedown really, but trust me, we're gonna put this thing through its paces. Shit. Ah, fuck. 94 pounds. Still a little top heavy.